All right, welcome. Today we are digging into a pretty sensitive question, but one that's backed by a ton of research. Does the ethnic diversity of the place we live actually change how much we trust each other?
Yeah, that's a massive question, right? It gets to the very heart of how we build societies that actually stick together. So let's skip the opinions and just dive straight into what the data says.
Okay, first things first, we need to get on the same page about a key concept, social capital. It's basically the trust we have in our neighbors, our willingness to help each other out, that shared sense of community. You can really think of it as the invisible glue holding a society together.
So where does this whole conversation even start? Well, our story really kicks off with one pivotal study that totally ignited a global debate.
So back in 2007, the very famous political scientist Robert Putnam, he publishes this huge study looking at social capital all across the United States. And his main finding was, well, it was uncomfortable, and it was definitely controversial. He found that in areas with more ethnic diversity, there were lower levels of social trust.
And the effects he was seeing were widespread. According to his data, it wasn't just that people in more diverse areas trusted their neighbors less. They also had less faith in their local government, they were less likely to vote or volunteer, they had fewer friends, and they even reported being less happy. They just kind of withdrew and spent a lot more time watching TV.
Putnam's conclusion from all this was, frankly, pretty stark. He said diversity seemed to trigger what he called anomie, which is this feeling of normlessness and social isolation. It basically caused people to hunker down and just pull away from everyone.
And you can really see the difference in the raw numbers. It's kind of stunning. In a super diverse place like Los Angeles, only about 30% of people said they trusted their neighbors. But then you look at the really homogenous communities in South Dakota, and that number shoots up to 75%. That is a huge gap.
So, of course, the big question right away was, okay, is this just an American problem, something shaped by its unique history, or is this pattern showing up everywhere else? Well, researchers around the world got right on it.
To really get the big picture, researchers put together a massive meta-analysis. So what they did was combine the results of 87 different high-quality studies from all across the Western world. This gave them a truly global look at the evidence.
And when they crunched all that data from those 87 studies, the trend was pretty hard to ignore. A clear majority, 57 of them, found that negative relationship between diversity and trust. 30 didn't find any significant link, and only a tiny handful, just 3, found a positive one. Turns out the pattern Putnam saw wasn't just an American thing after all.
And as you dig into the global data, the picture gets even sharper. It turns out the negative effect is most powerful right down at the local neighborhood level. And the specific thing that takes the biggest hit is our trust in neighbors. This isn't just some vague feeling. It's a real, measurable phenomenon that's been detected in countries all over the world.
But here's where the story takes a really interesting, kind of counterintuitive twist. There's this very well-known social theory that says the exact opposite should be happening.
So on one hand, you've got this thing called contact theory. It's a really logical and, frankly, hopeful idea. The more we hang out with people from different backgrounds, the more we'll understand them and trust them. Makes sense, right? But then, on the other hand, you have this mountain of data showing that at the community level, more diversity often means less trust. So, what gives?
And this paradox just gets deeper. Research in schools, for instance, found something that nobody expected. As schools got more ethnically diverse, students' desire to make friends outside of their own ethnic group actually went down, not up. They were more likely to just stick with their own group.
This quote from the research just sums up the whole puzzle perfectly. On a one-to-one level, getting to know someone from another group, that usually leads to more positive feelings. But at the community-wide level, having more diversity often correlates with more negative average attitudes. It's a real head-scratcher.
So what are we supposed to make of all this? Is the story really as simple as diversity lowers trust? No, not at all. The reality is so much more nuanced, and context here is absolutely everything. Look, the correlation is real, we've seen the data, but it is so important that we don't overstate its importance. Diversity is just one piece of a much, much larger puzzle that shapes what a community feels like.
To put this into perspective, a huge British study tried to figure out why trust levels are different from one neighborhood to the next. What they found was that ethnic diversity accounted for just 1.6% of that difference. 1.6%! It's a real effect for sure, but it's a tiny piece of the pie.
Now compare that to this. In that exact same study, Economic deprivation, poverty, explains 16% of the variation in trust. That is 10 times more impactful than diversity, which really suggests that what often looks like a diversity problem might actually be, deep down, an economic problem.
Okay, so let's tie this all together. What's the takeaway? 1. The data is clear. There is a consistent negative correlation found between ethnic diversity and social trust in a lot of studies. 2. And this is just as important, the size of that effect is often much smaller than other things, especially poverty. And 3, this all presents us with a real, complex challenge.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Because greater diversity is the reality for societies all over the globe, the data shows this can sometimes challenge our social bonds. So the question isn't whether we should have diversity. The real question is, knowing what we know, how do we get intentional about building the social trust that makes a community strong? That is the challenge ahead of us.